These pouches have all been made with our Woodland animal pouch panel, and it's really versatile. It's originally designed to make 3 pouches in 3 different sizes, so maybe something for hair accessories, cosmetics, your sewing haberdashery. The smaller one is perfect for loose change or things like your sewing clips. But the panel, as I said, is really versatile because this is how it was designed. So the front and the back for the larger panel are the squirrel, and the lining is the flowers. And then the medium-sized one is the mouse on the front and back, flowers for the lining, and the little one at the bottom there is hedgehog front and back, toadstools for the lining. However, if you're savvy with your fabric, you could use a squirrel on the front and the flowers on the back, as I did here, and then your own lining, and then you can double the amount of pouches that you make. Or you could just use the squirrel as the front, the flowers as a front, and then the squirrel and the flowers. That's 4 pouches. That means that if you just use these for your front and your own backing fabric and your own lining, you can actually make 12 pouches in 3 different sizes with the panel. And although again it was designed to make zipped pouches, there's no reason why you couldn't make something like the little bag at the back there if you had some handles instead of a zip, or you could just use them as little storage boxes instead. Now with these, I've used an H640, so it's something to give these a little bit of stability. You can see they stand up alone, but they're quite nice when they're quilted as well. So on the larger pouch here, I've used a crosshatch by drawing diagonal lines at a 60-degree angle to create the diamonds, but on the back I've just sewn a wavy line. Or of course you don't have to quilt them at all if you don't want to, so I'll leave that entirely up to you. So you will need, if you're making the zip pouches, 3 lengths of zip. So let's just measure those for you. So I would go for a 14-inch zip for this one, a 10-inch zip, and then for the smaller one you're going to need a 6-inch zip, and then we'll cut those down to size. But I will leave all the measurements in the description box below, and the quantities of the H640 or whatever kind of interfacing you're going to use as well. And all I've done here is just added a little ribbon to the top of it, to the end of the zip of each one, because I just thought that added a nice little detail. So this is how we make them. So just pop those out of the way, and we'll go for the medium size, which is the mouse. So I fused fleece to the wrong side, and then of both pieces, so I'm having mouse on the front and flowers on the back, and then I've cut 2 lining pieces to the same size. So I've just used this as a template, and my zip is way too long, but I just happen to have longer zips, so that's absolutely fine. So the first thing we're going to do is to quilt it. So I'm going to use a friction pen and make a 60-degree line in 2 directions across the fabric. So let's start in the centre at the bottom and draw my line there, and I'm going to make these 1.5 inches apart. On the larger pouch I would do this 2 inches apart, and if you're quilting the smaller one I would make that 1 inch apart. So just go all over in one direction. And do a little test first if you're using marking tools like this, because sometimes they can stain the fabric. I have tested with this one and it's fine. So that's in one direction. Then we need to do a 60-degree angle in the opposite direction, which should be this way. So I'm just using the 60-degree line on my ruler here, match that up with the bottom, and then draw the lines, and then use the 1.5 inch marker across my ruler. There we go, and just go all the way over. Of course you don't have to do 60-degree angles. It would look quite nice if you're using 45-degree angles, in which case it would look more square. Or as I said before, you don't have to quilt this at all. I do think it looks nice though. It gives it a more plush, more expensive kind of look. On the back I'll just do the wavy lines, I think, so I'll show you 2 different ways of doing that. So I can lengthen the stitch on my sewing machine slightly, so I'm going up to a 2.6 on this one, and simply sew across the lines. I always like to check from the back because it's easier to see sometimes if you've missed any of the lines. So let's get that out of the way, and as I used a friction pen, so I've just dropped my board, I'm just going to waft an iron over the top of the hair so that the lines disappear. So that's the one side quilted. On this side, again, I'm just going to do a wavy line. So I don't need to draw the line first. It doesn't need to be particularly accurate. I'm just going to meander across and not have these lines uniform and no particular distance apart. So this is quite a quick and fun way of quilting, and it doesn't need to be particularly accurate, so you don't need any skill whatsoever to do this. It's really easy. And a couple of more lines I think will do. Now you could really go to town with these depending on how much time you have, because I'm thinking maybe little French knots in the centre of the flowers would look really lovely. Or you could use a metallic thread to give it a little bit of a sparkle. If you wanted to use free motion embroidery, there's no reason why you couldn't sew around each one of the flowers or the little mouse individually. But you can see that those are the lines that I've sewn. So it's just something quick and easy and a little bit different. So the next thing we're going to do is to put in the zip. So let's take one of our lining pieces and the zip. I'm just going to chop the end off this a little bit, it is way too long. And first of all we're going to sew the zip facing downwards to the top of my pouch. So I'm not going to put the zipper foot on the sewing machine, I'm just going to move the needle over to the left hand side, which you'll find with most computerized or digital sewing machines will have that function. Basically there's no width on a straight stitch, so a lot of machines, when you use the width button, will allow you to move the needle from the left to the right. So give it a try on your machine, it's quite useful because I don't have to change the feet on my machine. And then we'll take the opposite side, the lining side, and place that over the opposite side of the zip. And I like to sew from the side that I've just sewn so I can see where the stitch line is. So let's line up the edge of the lining with the edge of the outer fabric and sew across the same line. So the zip's sandwiched in between the outer and the lining fabric, and then we'll need to place the second half of the outer fabric over the opposite side of the zip, and again from the zip side so we can see where we're sewing. So line up the edge of the fabric with the edge of the zip and the edge of the outer with the edge of the outer, so it's all matching up nice and squarely. If you wanted to pin that or use a quilter's tape or a glue pen to hold the zip in place, and that's an option for you. So I just like to line up the edges as I'm sewing. I find that the easiest way to do for me. So that's the lining on the opposite side of the zip. Oh sorry, the outer on one side of the zip. Then we'll sew the lining to the opposite side of the zip in the same way, from the side that I've just sewn. So I line up all the edges again and sew. So when I open this out, I've now got the outer pieces on each side of the zip and the lining pieces on the opposite side of the zip. Now I'm just going to press this with the fabric pulled away from the zip, and then we'll top stitch it in place. Just give that lining a press as well, that's a little bit creased. And the same on the outside. And then I'm just going to top stitch along each side of the zip. I'm not worried about this happening. I can trim that back later on. It's just fabric seemed to have twisted a little bit when I was sewing, but that's not a problem at all. I'll just make sure that that is even when we sew the rest of the bag together. So I'll go back to the centre now with my needle. And again, just sew along each side. I'm just making sure that the lining is pulled away, because I can't see where the lining is. Just making sure that it's pulled away from the zip. And we'll do the same on the opposite side. So just make sure that's nice and flat and pulled away. And now I can trim off the end of the zip, and I'm just going to trim that back slightly and taper it so that the ends match. On this side, I'm going to open the zip up and just sew the ends together right at the edge, right within the seam allowance. And that'll keep the zip closed while we sew the rest of the bag together. Let's just snip that one off there. Right, then we'll fold this over so that the two outer pieces are right sides together and the two lining pieces are right sides together. And I'm just going to open the zip halfway because I'll need to turn this through. And then we're going to sew all the way around, across the sides, across the bottom, across this side. I'm going to leave a turning gap here so that I can turn it the right side out, and I'm not going to sew the cut out corners. When I come to where the zip is, I'm going to push it towards the lining side, because that, as you can see, is like an H shape. So push it in, and that'll make the ends of the zip turn over inside the bag. That makes it nice and neat. So let's start at the side here. And I'm just using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. It doesn't have to be exactly a 1/4 of an inch or 5 millimeters. If you want to use the edge of your sewing machine foot as your stitch guide, then that's absolutely fine. So let's leave my turning gap here. So skip down a little bit and then carry on and straight across the bottom. And back down the second side. And I would just take it quite slowly as you go over the zip. Never had a problem sewing over nylon zips, but just slow down a little bit if you're concerned. Right, down to the corner, and then we'll make the box shape in the bottom. So if we open this out so that the side seam's sitting on top of the base seam, and sew straight across. And I generally like to just squish the seam allowance in opposite directions. I think that's a nice thing about having pre-printed panels like this. You know that the square shape at the bottom is going to be exactly the right size, so it's in proportion to the rest of the bag. And it's nice to have the print right in the centre of the bag as well. We'll just do the same on all four corners like that. Because if you're making this out of fabric, just a general fabric, then you're going to have a print running all the way across, whereas here you've got like a specific design right in the centre, which I think is a lovely idea. That makes it look very shop bought, I think. So again, just open those out so the side seam's on top of the base. And there's no reason why you couldn't take a template from these and make it from paper, so that you can use your own fabric and make even more of them. Quite happy for you to do that. Oh, just need to sew the base of the outer there, I missed that one. So there again with the outer fabric. Let's open this out. Line the edges up and sew. And then the final one here, pull it out and sew straight across. Whoops, and sew straight across. Okay, then we'll turn this the right side out through the gap that I left just in the side there. That's why the zip needed to be open. So just pull that through. I did leave a particularly small gap, but the smaller the gap, the less of a seam that you're going to see when we sew the opening closed in just a second. Okay, let's push that out. I'll just push the ends of the zip through as well. I'll open that all the way now. And you can see the zip kind of tucks into the edge of the bag quite neatly. Snip that off. And let's push out the corners and just double check you've caught all of the fabric at this point, because sometimes it doesn't quite work. That's nice and neat at the bottom. And then if you pull open each side of the turning gap, the sides will want to roll over, and then you can sew that closed. If I was making this as a gift or to sell, then I would change the thread for the same colour thread so you don't see that, or you could even sew that closed by hand if you wanted it to be completely invisible with a little ladder stitch. And that's it. So let's push the lining inside the bag, give it a final press if you need to. That's the zip closed. And again, with the other bags, I've put just a little bit of ribbon on the edge of there, which is a nice finishing touch, I think. So there we go, there's another pouch finished. So I think you'll see how quick and easy these are to make, but as I said, they are very versatile. If you did want to leave off the zip and put the little handles on it and make a bag, then that's a nice option too. You could have a complete matching set of mice, of squirrels, and of hedgehogs. So again, all of the details for all the extra materials you need are in the description box below, with a link to my website where you can buy the panel to make these from. I hope you enjoy making yours.